thanks for doing this, first of all. This is a real privilege. Um, I usually start off like gently easing people into conversation with coffee. So is that something that's important in your house?
Coffee?
Yeah.
No, I don't drink coffee.
And do you use like pre-workout, say like caffeine and stuff for your,
I use pre-workout. Yeah, absolutely. I use pre-workout. I just can't do coffee. I hate the flavor and
that's usually a
yeah,
deal breaker, yeah.
I can't even do coffee and like ice cream or cakes or anything. Like just no coffee flavor for me.
Yeah.
But yes, I use pre-workout. Um,
Is
I
that like, do you cycle that? Because even I spoke to Brent the other day, and he was saying that if he like tries to be really picky about when he has it, because he's like, I know he's a real like 0.01%er of
yeah.
everything has to be right. Are you more kind of blasé with it?
Um, I try obviously not to take too much of it. I'm
Mm.
aware of that. But no, I don't cycle off it. Like we've talked about it many times to do it before the games. So like cycle off before the games so that when I compete, you'll get that like super kick.
Mm.
But I I am addicted to the caffeine. So if I don't get any pre-workout, I'm tired.
Yeah.
And I'm not gonna do that to myself right before the games. Make myself feel sluggish and tired leading up to the games. Like that's gonna affect your head more than whatever boost you get from the caffeine than when you compete.
Mm.
Um, but I try to be aware of it that I'm not too addicted to it, if that makes sense. Like I can totally go train without having my
Yeah.
pre-workout.
Yeah.
Like I can, but I don't see the point in doing so because there are also some benefits from taking the pre-workout
Yeah.
that help you. So I let myself take it, but obviously, like I had to cycle off while I was
I was just gonna say, you must
pregnant.
have had a real kick in the face with the caffeine after when you started back.
Yeah, well, it wasn't as bad as I expected it to be while I was pregnant to like stop taking
Yeah. Yeah.
pre-workout. It was yeah, it was fine. And then all I would have because you're allowed to have coffee while you're pregnant, and I don't drink coffee, so I had literally no caffeine except for I started taking like when I was feeling the most tired, I would take the noon tablets with caffeine in it. So it's
Oh
like
yeah.
from
Yeah.
green tea extract, so it's like 40 milligrams of caffeine, and that like even if maybe it didn't give me anything, it gave me that like mentally, I'm like, oh, I'm having caffeine, so I'll be more fresh.
Like a
Um,
placebo.
yeah, exactly. So I at least did that. And also while breastfeeding, like I could do that, but it's definitely excited to go back to getting my pre-workout. I'm like, that will be like extra boost that I'll get.
Yeah, I
I'm one
remember.
of those people that like I really like pre-workout.
Yeah, I remember my wife, like, she's allowed to have, I think it was like 1 cup a day, when she was pregnant and when she was breastfeeding. And then, like, there was obviously times where she's like, oh, maybe I won't have it today. Like, I'll just, she was kind of felt guilty about nearly having it. But then, she used to pick and choose so carefully. She'd be like, I'd be like, first thing in the morning having a coffee. I'm like, oh, do you want a coffee? She'd be like, no, maybe I'll wait. Like, there's this
Yeah.
angst over when to have it, like, because it's like your allowance for the day. Like, um, I was looking up as well. You've done like a hell of a lot of podcasts, like Loud and Live and Make Pods Great Again and Judy Foucher's and Talking Elite. And like, is that kind of like, do you view that as a sort of an obligation on the fact that you have, I guess, you've kind of grown into an almost ambassadorial role with the sport? Is that something that you feel like you need to do, or is it something that you kind of seek out yourself to do as well?
No, I guess I don't really seek out to do them. Um, and I do say no to a lot of them. So it's nice to hear you say that I've done a few.
Yeah.
Um, because I feel like it's a really nice platform to talk.
Yeah.
Like I express myself on Instagram and I can express myself on Facebook or whatever.
Mm.
And during interviews leading up to the games, and I've like played around a little bit with YouTube, but it's never like it's not the same as doing a podcast. I can it's so hard to communicate the right way through just posts.
Yeah.
So when
Yeah.
you do podcasts, you can actually like, yeah, share a little bit more and more detailed. And especially with all the messages that you tend to get on social media, it's very hard to answer all of them properly. And then it's kind of nice to be able to like, well, I actually talked about this
Yeah.
in details on that podcast. And when I did like a podcast with Stacy, that was Stacy Sims, like we were talking about supplements while pregnant and while breastfeeding. And it's like all the questions you may have about supplements, you can go to that that talk that we had
Yeah.
and listen to it. Like it's an easier way for me to communicate, and I don't look at it as an obligation, but I enjoy doing it
Yeah. Yeah.
as long as it's not too many of them. Like it was
Yeah.
very hard, especially now after giving birth to Freya and taking care of her. Like you have so limited time
Yeah.
that I yeah, I've said no to a lot of podcasts after she came, because in my spare time I'm gonna be training or I'm gonna
Yeah.
be sleeping.
Yeah.
Now it's a little bit more under routine, and that's why we're talking on a Sunday. It's a rest day, so she's outside sleeping, and I got my free time, and I'm gonna do the podcast with you then.
Yeah. I think even like one of the things with social media, like say posts and stuff, people can attribute tone, like so you can say if you send a message back, people can say like, "Oh, Annie was a bit snippy when I asked," whereas you're just answering like genuinely. But even like you've amassed like a huge following over the years, and you've built a brand of like, I don't know, the kind of like accessible and likable character, like, and obviously like social media has its downsides as well. And I was kind of curious, like, say recently you've gone through pregnancy and like training up as far as you could and then going back to training, and given how everyone on social media I suppose is maybe quick to share opinion regardless of like whether it's an educated opinion or not, like did you have to listen to a lot of like, or did you have to kind of cut through a lot of criticism of like you shouldn't be doing this or it's dangerous and that kind of thing?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes. But I guess you've gotten kind of used to it at this stage. There's this one and one comment that might affect me, because I do read the
Mm,
comments. Um, because I feel like, especially the long ones, when people take the time to write something, I want to read it and show that respect,
mm,
and answer if it's something that is worth answering, or I feel like I really want to answer. Um, I think the hardest ones where people were saying that I was doing harm to my baby. And that's, yeah, like that's the hardest, because then I'm like, oh my God, am I doing it? Like I would never do
mm,
anything that could potentially harm my child. Like, of course not. Um, but that's from the people that obviously don't know and don't know me and my body. And
mm.
for those people, I try to just tell, like, I try to ignore. And it's nice then to be able to just say, like, I got a lot of assistance through my pregnancy. I went to see doctors. I read so much material regarding pregnancy and training while pregnant, and what to do, what not to do. And I think I played it a lot on the safe side.
Yeah.
Like I was always on the safer side, and everything now shows that it's good for
Yeah.
us to continue being active. And I also made sure that I was saying, like, if you've never been active before
Yeah.
and you get pregnant, of course you're not going to start going to the gym and be like super active while you're pregnant. But
Yeah.
if you have been, like, that's what felt good to me. Um,
It'd
but yeah,
nearly do more damage to stop, like, because I know even for my wife, like, that was her outlet. That was her, like, her social outlet, her emotional
yes,
outlet, or it was the one thing that was consistent when everything else was changing. Like, she could still go to the gym, and yeah, she was doing maybe step ups instead of box jumps, or like
definitely.
dumbbells instead of barbell or whatever. But it was all within her control, and it was like for your mental health as well as just your cardiovascular and stuff. It's great. I think, like you said there, the nail on the head is like if you haven't been doing something new, like don't suddenly start doing something because that could potentially cause damage. But if you, similarly, if you have been doing something all along, to suddenly stop doing it could be like just as damaging to you, maybe not to the baby, but to you, like.
Absolutely. Yeah. And like you said, mentally, that was something that I felt like I was in control of
Hmm.
and felt good. Like when I woke up and I was tired and stiff or something and I didn't feel like training, I would just get on the bike, like pedal a little bit, and then I would feel so much better and
Hmm.
be able to do something. And there's so much bodybuilding and scaling options that you can do and sit on a bike. Like I spent a lot of time sitting on a bike and just getting, like, moving, and it just
Hmm.
felt good. Like, yeah, I felt amazing throughout my whole pregnancy. But yeah, it
Yeah.
was kind of funny to see also the negative comments while I was pregnant was mostly from men. and women were
Sure,
very
men
supportive
know
of it.
everything. That's why.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, yeah, because you know.
Yeah, that's I think that's why I stipulated the mostly uneducated criticism, like the
Yeah. And then the interesting thing was after or post birth, um, more of the negative comments were from women. I didn't get a lot of negative comments, but when I started training again post birth was from women. So that was very interesting to me.
do you think that's because like maybe they didn't go back or they didn't feel ready
Yes.
or whatever, and they're maybe, I don't know, like subconscious
I
jealousy or something maybe?
I don't think it's jealousy. Because I don't think anyone should be jealous of my recovery post birth. That's been a slow ass process. Like I got pretty darn messed up.
Yeah.
Um, However, I think it's more um them feeling maybe that I was pushing them to
Okay.
start
Yeah.
training post birth. And that's never what I'm trying to do.
Yeah.
I'm never trying to tell someone to do something they don't want to do. Um I'm sharing myself on social media. That's just me. And I'm trying to inspire, assist, educate, or help wherever I can help. Um, but me starting to train post birth was me finding myself a little bit again.
Yeah.
And it didn't mean that I was going to the gym to get into the best shape again, or that I had to lose some weight or feel strong. It was me getting that endorphin release and feeling like myself again. And I think every single woman that has gone through birth, we all experience it a little bit differently. But having your first child, you feel different. It like changes you in a
Yeah.
way that you can't imagine. And I I guess I needed to feel like I was still me,
Mm.
that I wasn't just this person that was taking care. And I'm not taking anything away from that. It's also incredible to feed my perfect baby girl and hold her, and like she's what made me so happy when I was so messed up after my birth. Like she was the only thing that made me happy at that time. um but that I had another purpose than just feeding and sleeping. Like I felt like I needed something else to be in control of, and that was, I started feeling myself when I was able to sit on a bike,
Yeah.
sweat, and just get that adrenaline rush. Like that was me getting back to being me, not me rushing into being the competitor
Yeah.
Annie, but me becoming myself again. And I feel like everyone, yeah, that's also another thing that is maybe a little bit different for a professional athlete, is at some point you're going to have to go back to work. And for me, that was also going back to the gym.
Yeah.
So when my maternity leave is over, that's me gradually getting back to the gym and becoming the athlete that I am again.
Yeah. You mentioned there like sharing stuff that you know you've been very open with a lot of like what you've gone through and stuff, and even before pregnancy and before birth. Is that like, maybe you think part of the deal now that because say there's people like you that put yourself out there and share things, that you have to then accept that there's going to be criticism, or you know, these burner accounts set up as just as part of the deal? Like, even I know Noah Olsen recently got a lot of grief on Dave Castro put up a video of him saying that he's doing the open, and like just the comments are just, some of them are so nasty, like. And even I saw similar on Daniela Brandon put up a post the other week, and Chandler Smith putting up the inclusivity post like about announcing the panel yesterday. Like there just seems to be this constant like kind of just whisper in the background. Is that something that you think you just kind of have to accept? If I want to share, I have to listen to that stuff as well?
Yeah, well, you don't have to listen to it, but if you want to share, you need to be okay with that part as well,
Yeah.
which I am. And it wasn't, I went a lot back and forth how much I was going to share regarding pregnancy, regarding recovery, post birth, and all of that. But it seems like there's almost too little of the reality that's being shared.
Mm.
Same as we see on social media. Like I'm sharing my best lifts. I'm sharing the sessions that go really well because that's something that I'm proud of and I want to show and I want to inspire with. But I also share the bad days because
Mm,
they're what make us human. Like we all have those bad days. I don't wake up, and I think that's one of the other things that people are so obsessed with is motivation. It's like we all need to be motivated all the time. Nobody is. And I think we need to realize that nobody is motivated all the time because we can't be looking for that because then we're never going to get anything done. And I have those bad days where I wake up and I don't want to go to the gym and I'm feeling stiff and I'm feeling tired and don't want to exercise. But it doesn't mean that I'm not going to go. I don't need to have that motivation every single day. Like it's impossible.
mm,
And I felt like that was something that was a little bit lacking out there was after birth, like the way I went through mine, that there's a lot of other women that might deal with similar things. And as soon as I shared some of the things that I have been struggling with, the amount of messages I got and the amount of stories I got from other women that wanted to share their story with me as well. And them sharing their story helps me too.
mm,
Me seeing that other women had gone through something similar and they had made it back. And that helped me and has helped me in my process. And I am capable of helping someone else by sharing that. Screw the negative comments. Like, that is what it is.
yeah.
If someone else can gain from it, it honestly doesn't matter.
Yeah, I speaking of sharing, I saw you recently enough you shared a picture of the I think it was 2010 games with complete with socks and you're up I think
Oh,
you were
yeah.
climbing climbing a rope or something. I was curious like when you think back to that like finishing second in 2010 like at that point are you envisaging this career that you had at the time? Are you thinking like, "Oh, I'm professional athlete is on the cards"? Because like there was no such thing really then as a professional CrossFit athlete. There was no real meaningful sponsorship deals like there are today.
No.
I think there was 2,500 affiliates in the globe compared to like 15,000 now. Like you're a household name in all of those affiliates, whereas back then, it was so much of a smaller community. Like, was there a point in time, do you think, where your view of yourself within the sport changed, or where it became a possibility of like, oh, this could actually be a full-time career long term?
I guess that happened after winning the games, 2011.
Yeah.
Um, but absolutely not in the beginning. But for some reason, I was going to go to med school. And I decided, like, oh, I'll give this one more year. Like, I have to try this. And then I got second place at the game. So that was 2009. And then I postponed and decided to like try CrossFit. I got second place 2010. And I had just absolutely loved that year. And I love competing. And I was like, I think the coolest thing ever would be to get the title fittest woman on earth. And that was what you were doing it for then.
Yeah.
Like the prize purse for winning the CrossFit Games 2010 was $5,000. And I had no idea it was going to go up. I think it was 5,000. But yeah, I had no idea if it was going to go up or not. And what I won 2010 was like a gift certificate for like $250 of training gear or something. And I was like, that's amazing. Like that was super cool to me. And I was starting to get like small sponsorships in Iceland, like eating for free at a restaurant or something like that. So it was something that helped you,
Yeah.
but I had no idea that I was going to be able to make a career out of it. But I knew that I wanted to try to win the title fittest woman on earth. Like that was something that I just really wanted, and I really enjoyed training. Like I finally felt like I found like a sport that I just really enjoyed doing. So there were definitely not a lot of people around me that understood my decisions at that time. For some reason my parents were super supportive. Like I don't understand how they got there so quickly. Also without knowing that there was any money or anything in it. I signed a deal with Reebok 2010, my first like partnership, and I decided to go for it. And after winning the games 2011, I was like, now I have not that I felt the need to prove myself to others that I was allowed to do this as a career, but I proved it to myself.
Yeah.
So by winning the games and getting the prize purse that year, it made me feel okay with taking another year in doing this. It kind of like, I don't know the right English word for it, but yeah,
Yeah, you kind of gave yourself permission because you had,
Yes,
yeah,
permission to continue.
yeah.
Yeah. That I
But
didn't
even,
have to find more reasons for why I'm allowed to do this.
yeah.
That I had to go back to school, that I was actually allowed to continue doing this, and I didn't have to, yeah, prove myself to others in any other way.
And then if we go through your history, like it's it's pretty impressive. So like, so you know, second, first, and then first in regionals and first in the world again, and then first in regionals, second in the world, third in regionals, like 38th in a withdrawal. Then like as someone who's was so prolifically successful up until that point in 2015, was that a difficult, like was that your most difficult games to recover from, say having to pull out?
Um, yes and no. I feel like 2015 was definitely the year that sits the heaviest on me. Um, because it was the year where I realized that my body couldn't just do everything.
Yeah.
Like I felt like my body failed me. And I'd always gone into everything believing that your mind is going to give up before your body does. And that's how I pushed myself in anything. I did a lot of stupid stuff, like challenges here in Iceland, ran an ultra marathon in the mountains, did like paid to do like a hell weekend kind of thing where I couldn't sleep. Like I was always trying to push my body to the limit. And all of a sudden, it was something that was so out of my control, getting the heat stroke that year and having to withdraw. It's such a disappointment somehow in my body. And mentally, it set super, super heavy on me. But 2016 was one of the hardest years for me
As in like
because,
coming back, like the training
yeah,
again. Yeah.
yeah, competing at the games 2016, because I was in phenomenal shape 2016. And I don't even remember where I placed, like 11th or something,
Yeah, I think
12th.
12th, I think, yeah.
Yeah. And say like I want to just push that year out. No, I was the reason I was really disappointed with that is it was the first time at the games where I was like, oh, let this just be over. Like one more event, let this be done. Like I was thinking that on the floor, like, oh, come on, time cap. Like I've never even asked about time caps and anything, but that was the way I was feeling there because I was so scared. Like I was terrified that I was going to get a heat stroke again.
Yeah.
So when we got to know that there was Smurf again that year, like I broke down completely. And then they showed the video clip right before we started Murph, like of me tumbling there. And I had never even watched the video because I just wanted to push that out of mind, out of sight. But that's not really how things work. You actually have to deal with them. Um, so yeah, that year I was just every single time I came out of the competition floor and I said to Frederick and I said to my coach, I'm like, I could have gone faster. And I think that's probably one of the worst things you can do to yourself as an athlete is leaving the competition floor feeling like you could have done better.
How did you
And
recover from that then afterwards? Like how did you get, I suppose, the fire back or get the drive back?
well, I dealt with my issues. I started working with a sports therapist and I talked about the heat stroke. I watched footage of the heat stroke because I decided after that year, I never like I love competing. Like I love competing. That's where I get to show all the hard work that I put in. And that year I did not get to show the
Mm.
hard work I put in. I was disappointed every single time with myself. And I felt like I was letting myself down every single time because of fear. And so I dealt with it. And it also helped me going away from LA. I think it helped me a lot going to Madison the year after
Mm.
because I could push away some of those bad memories that I had had. I obviously have incredible memories from there too, but it was good for me to get the change of venue and talking through the heat stroke and actually dealing properly with it.
Yeah. Like you've had, say, 9 years at the games and only three of those you finished outside the top 10 and only one open finish in that time outside the top 10 in the world. Like, you know, success breeds success, but it also maybe adds pressure. Like, is that something that you like? Do you ever feel, say, facing into a new season? Like maybe this year is an anomaly, I guess, because it's like it's so radically different in a lot of ways for you. But in other years, do you think like, oh God, how am I going to top last year now? Or like, does that ever play on your mind?
I guess it played on my mind 2012. That was where I got to
Yeah.
experience it for the first time. Um, And I hated competing for like the first day and a half, 2012. And then I learned to deal with it on the spot. Um, and I think after that, I kind of just know how to compete.
Mm.
You learn it every single time. You learn something more about yourself. But I think that year I felt that pressure and I decided not to let that pressure get to me and ruin what I get to do.
Yeah.
And I guess it's a way that you think about it before you compete. And now when I get super nervous every single time I'm competing. I get so nervous. But I would stop competing if I didn't get nervous anymore.
Yeah.
Like being nervous is a part of it. And that just means that I care. Like I care how I do. I care how I perform. And in some ways it's a privilege that I get to have this pressure. I'm not saying everyone would want to do what I do. Definitely not. There's probably not a lot of people that would want to go through the pain and suffer that I go through. But it's still, there are a lot of people that would like to compete and be on the big stage. And in that sense, it's a privilege for me to get to do so.
Yeah.
So I've learned to kind of embrace it. And I've learned through the years, and I learned especially there at 2016, that it's not the results that really matter. It's it's me doing what I can,
Yeah.
if that makes sense.
Yeah,
Like
no, I think
it's
Brent
so
Brent
easy
was
to
saying
fake it.
something. Yeah, Brent was saying something similar the other day. He was like,
Yeah.
you have to kind of separate yourself from what happens, and once you can, I suppose, not have those feelings that you had of being like, oh shit, I could have done more there. Like once you don't have those feelings, whatever else happens, like he was talking about events where he was 100% and came, 10th, but he was happy because it was like I
Yes.
literally couldn't have done anything else or anything differently. So yeah, I think that's an important point to make. And then like your most recent games appearance then 2019 saw like a drastic change in the look of the competition and the amount of people there and the setup and everything changed. You made it through as far as the final cut. And I suppose like when Frederick had to withdraw because of injury, that was on the first day. Like, does that, like, are you left with any positive memories of that year, or was it just like kind of?
Yeah, of course, I still have positive memories of that year. And obviously, I knew that Frederick was gonna, we knew leading up to it that it would probably not be the best year for him.
Yeah.
We were hoping that it would start better. But
Is that a
it's,
distraction? Not a distraction, but is that like, how do you compartmentalize that? Because it's different if it's like your training partner or your friend or whatever. But when it's your other half, is it like, do you kind of have one eye on him in the first event, think like, oh God, like, are you nervous for him, or do you have to just totally shut that out?
I get really nervous for him.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But we've been together for 10 years now. So I think we kind of know how to communicate. He knows what I need, and I know what he needs.
Yeah.
And we train together every single day, also leading up to the games. Obviously, I care a lot about his success, but he also cares a lot about my success. So we're not going to let it affect each other at
Mhm.
any point in any negative way. So we knew how to deal with it. So that's, I wouldn't say that's what makes that year not a good year in my
Yeah. Yeah.
memory. I have definitely good memories from that year. I thought there were some great events that were that year. Um, I think what I really dislike about that year is just definitely the fittest woman in the world was found. Tia was the best that year. Should have won. And I'm not going to try to take anything away from the girls that were top 10 that year either. Absolutely not. But do I think that the top 10 would be different if you would have had the field bigger? Yes, I do. Absolutely, I do. I think it would have been different without trying to take anything away from them because they
Yeah.
earned their spots in the top 10. Um, but it becomes a little bit too expensive when you have too few events before you do a cut like that. And I'm not against cuts, and I'm not just saying that because I got on the wrong side of that line. But I think it's important to have the test set up in a way that you're gonna have it as fair as possible, because in CrossFit we have so many different things that we want to test, and we've been able to test a lot of different things in 6 events at regionals, but then we also look at that as the whole competition, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So we have that, a very well-rounded 6 events that you're testing. At the games, I don't think it was a very well-rounded 6 events or whatever it was before you had to cut down to 10 athletes.
Is it difficult to kind of talk about like, um, without qualifying what you're saying? Because like I know even say some of the sound bites, the talking head bits on the documentary that year and stuff, it's kind of, there's like it'll be very easy for people to point and say, oh well, you're only saying that because, or like say when Pat, Brent, you and Brooke were interviewed for the documentary, like there's kind of it's an easy out for people to say, but like they were cut, so obviously they're going to say that, and like to kind of not, I suppose, to make a conscious effort to be like, I'm not actually bitter about it. I just want to explain.
Well, yes and no, but I don't know. I feel like I don't look at it like that for myself,
Yeah.
but I also don't look at it like that for myself, because I wasn't top 10 after those events.
Yeah.
I wasn't. So it was a fair cut. Like, I wasn't top 10.
Yeah.
And it's not Dave's fault. It's not any of the girls' faults. They beat me in those events that were done.
Mm.
It's absolutely 100% my own fault, because I know exactly where I lost myself. It was not top 10. And I think that's where I beat myself the most. I don't think I look at the year as, I don't think it was the perfect games. And I think audience would also agree it was not the perfect games, because we're used to going through all these obstacles all together. We're used to that was a part of being at the games, was that you got this experience, you went on this journey with all the athletes, and we all got to suffer together, and it mattered. Every single event mattered.
Mm.
And we've seen some incredible comebacks at the games as well, which is always fun to watch.
Mm.
But me not making it to a top 10 was my fault. If you look at any of the footage from the games, you know where I lost it. And it wasn't the sprint. Even though people talk about the sprint, it wasn't the sprint where I lost it. I started walking on a run. That's where I lost it. Like, that's where I will beat myself up and continue beating myself up. If I ever think about that year, that's 100% my fault why I wasn't top 10. I started walking on a run. And going back to 2015, that had a lot to do with that walk.
Yeah.
I
Just
felt
a fear,
warm, I
like,
felt uncomfortable, I felt nauseous, and I felt like I was gonna get a heat stroke again, and I just got scared and I started walking.
yeah.
The only positive I can take from that is how much I cried that year getting caught, because I didn't feel like that was like I was better than that, and I knew I was better than that, and knowing it was my fault was hard. And I woke up like in the middle of the night a few times after that. I'm like, this is a dream. Like, this is a dream. This is not over. Like, this must have been just a bad nightmare. And it was real, and it was my fault, and I was ashamed that I started like, that was always what I went back to. I wasn't ashamed that I got caught. I was ashamed that I started walking. And I think my biggest upside is I will never start walking again. I will rather get a heat stroke
I was
than
going to
start
say,
walking
maybe if we
again.
could try and find a midway point between
Yeah.
not walking and not getting heat stroke, that'd be great for everyone else. I think if you just hold the line.
And
um,
like, that's the big plus I can take from that year. But of course, where you said, like, when me, Brent, Pat, whatever are saying these things, obviously it's hard for us also, because I don't want to take anything away from the people
yeah,
that actually made it in the top 10, because they made it to the top 10. Like, they beat us.
yeah,
That's just how it was.
yeah,
But we can still say our opinion.
yeah. No, I agree. Yeah. With everything then, like say following on from that, you had all the controversy with Greg and everything and the sale and the changes since. And I suppose one thing that happened early on in all of that was Brent and some others set up the PFA, and the CrossFit themselves then answered that call of action, I suppose, with they installed an athlete advisory panel with um, James is on it, and Meredith and Neil and you. Were you surprised with the, I suppose, first of all, the initiation of that idea, and then second of all, that you were asked to be on it?
Um, no, not really.
Is it something that was lacking, do you think?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
100%. I don't think I should go into details about it. Um, but there were obviously changes that had to be made.
Yeah.
And I think what Greg did, that was what started the whole thing.
Yeah.
But there were a lot of underlying things going on before that. Otherwise, it wouldn't have gone that far, especially with the athletes committee making that as well. Like we've never in all professional sports, there's athlete committees
Hmm.
where
And
there's someone that's thinking.
yeah, sorry, is your, like, was your role on that, are you still on that now? Because I know you weren't compete, you were, I suppose, asked because you couldn't, it couldn't benefit you in any way to be on it. Are you
Yeah.
off it now again?
So I'm not on it now.
Okay.
No. Um, it was a very busy time while I was pregnant.
And was your, is the job of that panel then, like, is it like, say, uh you know, when obviously last year there was so many things that needed to be discussed and changed and stuff, because everything was like, the plates were constantly shifting underneath people. Is that a
Yeah.
case of like, okay, you know, James, Annie, like, here's what we're planning to do, here's our plan A for the games, here's our plan B, here's our plan C, what do you think of that? And then you guys could say, oh, I don't know if plan B, as an athlete, I'd find that stressful. Or is it that the kind of job that it was?
Yeah. Well, I'm not allowed to go into any details about any of the stuff, but yes, it's pretty much s- some of the things that we have been talking about in the like the committee that we made, like the athletes made themselves to take care of us as
Mm,
athletes. Some of those issues were being brought up in
okay.
the athlete committee as well.
Yeah.
Um, so we got a chance to actually talk to the head instead of all of us individually talking to Dave, talking to, well, not Greg, but Eric,
Eric,
and
yeah.
like expressing our opinion and worries and things that are going on. Now we have somewhere where all of us can bring, like, we can have meetings together and then just be represented by 10 athletes, and the athlete committee is just 4 athletes.
Mm,
So we talked about some of those things, and it was good. I've been in all of the meetings with the PFAA for them regarding things that we as athletes want to change. And then I could bring some of those things into the athlete committee. And then we were talking about, like you said, before the regionals or the qualification, or well, the games kind of qualification for the games, just not events, but there's a lot of things that go on behind the scenes, like judging, for example, appeal process, safety of
mm,
the athletes, fairness. Like one example is the timing when the athletes were all doing the workouts. Would it be time zones?
yeah.
Or there were also talks about, should we have it so that all the athletes are competing at the same time, like Roke did?
Yeah.
But then Kara's doing it in the middle of the night. And like some of these things that we were able to just talk about,
Yeah.
communicate, and then CrossFit made the decisions, or their the people, Curtis and Dave and Justin, like those guys made the decisions, but they listened
Yeah.
to a lot of the stuff that we got to say. And I feel like that's a huge step. We've never been able to, it's really hard if you're always the person that's running the show and you never really hear from the athletes really how it is to be on the other side. And it's the same, it's really beneficial for us athletes to get to know some of the things that go on behind the scenes when it comes to running an event and the games.
Yeah.
It makes you
Um,
appreciate the whole thing and you understand the process a little bit better. And I think overall, it's just more transparency, because there are so many things that CrossFit is doing that we just don't know about. We're always like, oh, is there drug testing? How much drug testing is there? Are you reviewing any of the appeals that we make when we make appeals at regionals or the games? Are you actually looking at any of it? Because you never hear anything.
yeah.
So I think just being a little bit more transparent with all of these things. And I think this is the first step in that direction.
Yeah. Um, going back to something you mentioned at the start, when you became pregnant, I know, like, say, with my own wife, who's given me permission to talk about this, just if in case anyone thinks I'm like throwing her under the bus.
Share something good.
But like sometimes I know something that she said a lot to me at the time was that like at times it felt like it almost like it wasn't her body. Like the pregnancy changed so much. Like say, like she mentioned that her balance changed or her spatial awareness and like coordination and stuff where she spent whatever the guts of 30 years just standing up out of a chair, and now suddenly she had to like change the way she stood up, or she'd reach for something and she'd be front heavy whereas like usually she'd be like neutral. I think like the further she got into it, like her perception of herself kind of changed as well. Like maybe the red line became something that she couldn't really approach anymore in her training, where she kind of had to pull back sooner and stuff. And I think she maybe couldn't do things that she liked to do or wanted to do. And suppose I was curious because like you spent years building, like you mentioned that training and competing is your job. You spent years building a tool to do your work with and like perfecting it and getting a body that's capable of feats of endurance and strength. So is it difficult then, like feeling and seeing that change? Like is that something that you have to kind of mentally prepare yourself for, or is it something that the ends kind of justifies the means, so the middle is okay?
The end definitely justifies the means, like for sure.
Yeah.
I thought it was going to be harder for me, to be honest, when I was pregnant. Um, it was definitely, you had the moments and you had the days. It was more like when you looked in the mirror and it's like,
Who's
don't
that?
recognizing yourself.
Yeah.
It's like, what? That's not my body. This is not what I look like. Um, and on, I had very few difficult days, but on those difficult days, it helped me just training, and it also helped me thinking about, but would I change anything?
Yeah. Yeah.
Would I prefer not to be pregnant and not to have a child? And no, I would never choose that. I would rather choose to be like this, look like this. And that's kind of what made it a little bit easier for me.
Mm.
Um, I think it was more like post birth that was really hard for me because I kind of expected it to be done then.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, there's no baby in there, but yet you don't have your body
Yeah.
back, if that makes sense. I
Yeah.
still didn't recognize my body. I still didn't recognize myself. And I think that was significantly harder than actually being pregnant, because then everyone knows that you're pregnant.
Yeah.
But post birth is like, someone still asked me, I got asked twice when I was due post birth. I'm like,
That's a
dude,
gutsy question to ask anyone,
yes.
no matter how sure you are.
uh, but yeah, like
But like even
that was way harder to deal with.
like one thing I wanted to praise you for was like your transparency, like postpartum. I'll say I think like you and Cara especially are doing incredible things as role models, because I know like my wife admires both of you hugely for being real, I suppose, and sharing like the shit things as well as the great things. Like has the reality of, so say obviously there was a period where you couldn't train when you were making your return, and
Yeah.
that's obviously going to be really difficult because if as you've mentioned, your outlet and your way to feel like Annie is to train in whatever capacity you can. So then since that period has ended, do you think has the reality of training and returning as a new mother surprised you, either with its difficulties or with how well you've adapted to it?
Both. I think a mixture of both. I'm surprised how well I've adapted to it mentally.
Hmm.
I think I'm stronger, if anything, mentally, after having my baby, but the process definitely taking me significantly longer to recover. And yeah, also just like another shitty thing to hear right after you give birth. Like my birth doctor came to me and she was like, well, this obviously wasn't the ideal birth and it will take you a long time to recover. I'm like, yeah, I know. Like it will be what it is.
Yeah.
And that's just the hand you're dealt. But she was like, yeah, I know that you make your living and that you're a professional athlete. Most people make it back, but I don't know if you're ever going to be able to lift a lot of weights again. I'm like, Well, like, do you really feel like that's the appropriate thing to tell me one day after I,
Yeah.
I give birth to my baby? Like, I'm still exhausted. I still haven't slept for like 3, 4 days. And this is when you
Yeah.
decide to tell me this. Um, so I think that sat with me a little bit, and I'm still not healed. Now I'm 6 months. Yeah, my daughter is now 6 months old, which is crazy, half a year old.
Yeah.
Um,
It
and
doesn't
I'm
get any
still
less crazy.
not, yes, I'm still not doing everything that I
Yeah.
feel like I should be able to do. Like, I'm not running yet.
Mm.
I'm not lifting super heavy yet, but I feel like I'm gradually recovering. And the same thing happened with my abdominals. Like, I got the abdominal separation, and apparently 50% of women have this, but yet you see so little about it.
Yeah.
So I feel like that's one of the things that I feel like I've just wanted to share. Like, hopefully I'm going to make it back from this, but this is who I am right now.
Mm.
And I hope I'm going to be ready for this season. If not, I'm not going to be ready, but at least yeah, I'm doing everything that I can. And I feel like that's something then worth sharing for women that might be struggling or dealing with the same. It's it's a longer process than I ever expected it to be.
Yeah.
Because some women and a lot of women around me, they take 4 or 6 weeks and they're back. And when I got told I should wait 6 weeks before training, I was like, I'll give you 10 days.
Yeah.
Like,
But even like a lot of people do, like they're back quickly, and some even rush back. Like I know, like my own wife she took it really slow. She was very conscious of her core and like her pelvic floor and, like separation and everything. And like she spent a lot of time doing like Pilates at home and rebuilding herself really carefully. And even now she's like, a year later being like, I actually kind of think maybe I did go back a little bit too fast. And like, I remember it being painfully slow for her, where she took,
yeah,
but even at the time she was like, no, I'm going to take ages. And then now she's still like, I probably should have taken another few weeks before I started. Things that seem arbitrary before, like doing a wall ball or doing a light clean, suddenly become tricky. Like, and all those impact things become, you have to be more conscious of them and stuff. Like, do you think, I suppose a follow on from that then is like seeing your comeback? Say yesterday you put up a video of like what to me is a heavy snatch, and I suppose pre-pregnancy that would have been more of a gimme for you, and then you're sharing your struggles with it, and things that you're still missing, like you mentioned the gymnastics and stuff. And
yeah.
I suppose I've spoken to some retired athletes in the past about leaving the competitive aspect of their identity behind and changing into something else. Like, I suppose it's different for you because it's hopefully like a break and coming back as opposed to like retiring. But is it something that you were conscious of going into it and coming out of the pregnancy, that you'd need to, like, your identity would have to be separated from what you were doing for a while, where it's something that was so intrinsic with you?
Oh, absolutely. And I've often thought about it. I've always taken it just 1 year at a time. When I've been asked the question, like, if I'm competing again or
Hmm.
when I'm going to retire, it's like, I don't know. As long as I enjoy doing this and I'm motivated, my body feels good and I want to, I'm going to let myself continue to compete.
Yeah.
And that's going to be as long as I can still be on top. Like, I've never been a person just to participate. Um, but I didn't know if I would want to come back after pregnancy. Maybe it would be time for the next things
Yeah.
to do. Just share. There's a lot of things that I want to do when I'm not competing. Honestly, like, there's so much of your time that goes into training that you can also do other things and other meaningful, impactful things. And I have so many things that I would want to do and share with people. Um, but I still feel like I want to compete.
Yeah.
And if I want to compete, if my body allows me, I'm being smart. Obviously, if you're following me on social media, I think you can tell that I'm being pretty smart with my comeback. I am making sure that I'm not going to come back. I'm making sure that I'm going to be good for the rest of my life. Like,
Yeah.
this year, it doesn't matter in the big scheme of things. Like, it matters to me that I'm going to be able to be active, strong, and healthy for the rest of my life. um and that's the process that I'm taking towards this. And I know it might be kind of crazy that I want to compete at the games within a year of giving birth, when it was also the kind of birth that I had. Um, but if it works, it works. If it doesn't, then I got next year, or then I have more time to do some of the other projects that I've been working on and wanting to share with the world.
Yeah, well, I think even it comes back to what you were saying about your kind of realization after 2016 that like once you can walk away happy with your efforts. Like I know
Yeah.
my own wife said that like she's doing the open as a mother for the first time, and she was like, you know, I'll give it my best, and she's like, my best is definitely going to be different than 2 years ago, but it's not going to be worse. It's just going to be a different
No,
best. You know, like once you give it, like only you can give your best, so it's, you know, up to you whether you give it or not. And then once you do, you can't like come 100,000th or come first. You can't really have any regrets. Like in once you've done it, you know?
exactly. And I guess it's hard when, like you said, with your identity, I identify a lot with being Annie, the CrossFit Games champion,
Yeah.
or the person that is competing, like the competitor side. But it's one of the things that I've had to think about ever since I got injured in 2013. It's one of the things that I've had to think about. What am I going to do when I'm not competing anymore?
Yeah.
And I think it's going to be a thing that a lot of athletes are going to struggle with, is figuring out their identity outside of competing. And I've been competing for over 10 years now. That's 1/3 of my life that I've been competing in CrossFit. So of course it's going to be hard for me to let go and start doing something else. But I think it's also important to realize that there are other things,
Yeah.
and it makes it easier now with your wife having a child, me having a child, that gives you a little bit of a different meaning and purpose in life. And then I think finding something else that you might be passionate about. And I feel like I am finding a lot of things that I am very passionate about that can, nothing will ever take over CrossFit, because I'm going to continue doing CrossFit for the rest of my life. Like your wife is doing the open, and it's at a different competitive state than maybe she did a year ago
Yeah.
or 2 years ago.
But she was
But it
30,
doesn't mean that
35
you're not
weeks
going to get
pregnant when
part
she
of
did it
it.
last year.
Yeah.
um, on that, like I suppose Matt retired a couple of weeks ago, and I think you know
Yeah.
maybe catching a lot of people off guard. Although everyone's claiming now like that they saw it coming. Do you think it's better for the sport? Obviously, there's a similar level of dominance on the women's side the last few years. Like, do you think it's better for the sport having people like Matt and Tia pushing the boundaries of like what's possible when it comes to dominance? Or do you think it's better for the sport having more of a toss a coin kind of, you know, this year could be this and next year could be that? Because even if you look at the four guys after Matt last year, toss a coin of who was going to finish. Like they were
Yeah.
all in a different position every day. Like, so do you think that it will it benefit the sport having more of an open field, or do you think having people like say you and Tia and like those consistent people all the time, do you think that that benefits the sport more than having like a it's anyone's game?
It's never fun if you just know who's going to win the games.
Yeah.
Of course not. You want to have it exciting. Um, I think it's always fun though to see the people that are the best.
Yeah.
Um, and it's also more fun for the people competing. Like I would want to compete against Tia, if you know what I mean,
Yeah. Yeah. You want to beat
because
the
I want to
best.
beat the best.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit disappointing for some of the guys too, because they're never going to get to beat Fraser.
I suppose the thing as
But
well is this year, like this first year now, post Matt, there's always going to be an asterisk over it of like, would Fraser have won it if he did it though? You know, like that kind of
Fraser
question mark.
probably would have won it. But I think
Yeah.
that's something that the guys also realize,
Yeah.
and why they're cool with Matt going is
Yeah.
because Matt is just so dominant. Like, I don't know how, but he is just that good. So yes, I think it's going to be more fun on the male side now. It's
Yeah.
been, I'm not going to say boring, because it's always fun to watch Matt. It's like we're just always impressed with what he's doing. And
Yeah.
it's not like he doesn't have competition. It was a little bit worse maybe this year because it was fun because there were just 5 people,
Mm.
but it was a little bit worse because he didn't get, you always have a guy that might beat him in this event, might
Yeah. The
beat him in that
spread
event.
was
So
smaller. Yeah.
he at least gets like competition in the different events.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I think it's gonna be exciting to watch the male side. Now. Tia obviously dominating on the female side.
Does it
But
ever play? Does
she's
it?
within reach. Like, and
Does it?
I'm never gonna take anything away from Tia because
Yeah.
she's one of the most impressive athletes I've ever met. And just looking at her, I'm like, incredible. Like, she's amazing. She's so strong. It's so tiny, and like, I don't know how she does it. She's annoyingly good at swimming, annoyingly good at running, but she is beatable. Like, I feel
Does,
like she's there, and you could get her.
she's nice as
So
well. Which is annoying. You'd almost rather if she was a bit of a bitch. Like it'd be make it easier.
yes, exactly.
um, I was curious. Like, say when you're if maybe more so on the men's side, like if you're say in a heat with someone who's that dominant for that long, do you think does it ever become a maybe a self-conscious or a subconscious thing where you're like, well, whatever I do, like Matt's going to win anyway? Like, does it? Do you think it ever plays like that? Because even I know you're a fan of American football, and I was kind of thinking that last week with like Tom Brady's kind of, there's. I suppose part of me thinks there's maybe a psychological aspect to it where the other team thinks, well, fuck it, they've got Brady, they're just going to win anyway. And Brady's own team thinks, well, we've got Brady, so we're going to win. And, it's just kind of self fulfilling prophecy in that way.
I would like to say no, because I don't think I've ever thought like that. And I hope I'm never gonna think like that.
Say when you're at
Competing
your
against
top, at the
Tia or
top,
competing against someone else, like, just because they're in the front does not mean that they're gonna win.
would you
Uh,
ever have that when you were in first? Like when you were, say,
it's something that you hope to have,
yeah, yeah,
if that makes sense.
yeah,
It's definitely, you want other people to think that you're that good that they don't even stand a chance, so why even
yeah,
bother? Like, obviously that would be amazing,
yeah.
but the truth is it's never like that.
Hmm.
Of course someone can beat you, and that's what the people in the top or in the lead know.
Hmm.
They know it. Fraser still gets nervous, of course. Like, it's not just a given. He works his ass off to be where he is, and then he's hoping that that's going to be enough to win.
Yeah.
He's hoping it's going to be enough to win because he knows that maybe someone else is going to come out there and be better. And I think that's the important thing for the people that are in second, third, 10th, even 20th. Like, those people can actually affect the leaderboard and make a change because they can beat some of the people that are in the first place, because they're not going to be the best at everything.
Do you think he feels relieved? Like that? Like, do you think that across
Yes.
your average CrossFitter, and not that he's average, but like that, people who have retired get that feeling of like, oh, thank God, I can just relax and not be on for like 9 months of the year.
I think Fraser is relieved. Yes, I think
Yeah.
so. Just the way he's talked about it. I know that he's enjoyed training significantly more now, training with Tia. But I also know that he was going to be ready to retire when he would retire.
Yeah.
Um, However, I think, yeah, obviously you will get relieved not having the pressure of competing anymore. But I think me, Katrin, and a lot of the other girls that I know, they're going to continue training and pushing themselves even when they're done competing.
Yeah, I get you.
So
Yeah.
that aspect is maybe not going to go away, but obviously the pressure of having to be ready, having to perform at a certain time, yes, you're for sure going to feel some sort of a relief.
Yeah. Well, look, we'll finish with a quick fire. I'm conscious I saw your baby being carried downstairs there a while ago. Is that how often? Is there a certain time of year that doesn't happen? The sleeping outside thing? Because I saw, was it you posted about it the other week where someone
Yeah.
gave you some shit for her sleeping outside and you had to defend it?
I don't get a lot of shit. I get a lot of questions about it. And I do get people commenting that you'll probably be reported in the States if you would do it. But I'm not in the States.
Is it just like a rite of passage, like a historic cultural thing, like they see, is it?
Yeah. Yeah. You do it all year round. You put the baby outside in the stroller and they sleep so well. Apparently, they do this in Denmark and Finland as well,
Yeah,
as
it's like
far
a
as I
Nordic.
know.
Yeah.
Um, I do not put her outside if it goes a lot below -10
But
outside.
it's good to know you have a cut off. Yeah, although to be fair, there are nights where Sloan won't sleep, where I would consider just putting her outside for a while, I think, just for a reset. Yeah, no, it's interesting. Well,
Oh,
look,
but she doesn't sleep outside during the night
oh
though.
no, yeah, I know. Jesus,
Oh,
no,
I'm
I'm
like, oh
joking.
my God, no, 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 no.
You would be
It's
reported.
that would probably be reported. But
Yeah.
I'm also, yeah, also I would probably never put her outside if I was in the States because I would be worried about someone stealing her or something. Or put her, and now I'm gonna get shit for saying that. Or I wouldn't put her outside if it's warm, for
Yeah.
example.
It just
There's,
means it just means you trust your Icelandic neighbors. That's You're not dismissing American
yes,
neighbors. You just trust your Icelandic ones. There, we've
exactly.
covered that nicely. Um, we'll finish with a quick fire, so they're all either or.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
so snatch or clean?
Snatch,
Surely after yes, say yeah. Deadlift or squat?
deadlift.
Bench or pull up?
Oh, both.
Yeah, you see you've got your eyes back on your pull ups. I'd say that's probably playing into that. Gymnastics or cardio?
Oh, I love both.
You have to. Look, it's the nature of the game.
Gymnastics,
Gymnastics. Okay. Bike or ski?
bike.
Okay. If you had to do for time, 100-calorie assault bike or 50 thrusters?
Oof. What weight on the thrusters?
Like 35 kilos.
50 thrusters.
God. I do 100 calories over 5 thrusters. Okay. Frederick or Freya? No, am I joking? Okay.
Oh,
That's a joke. Listen, thanks a million. I really appreciate you taking your time out. I think whatever you choose to do this year, however the year goes for you, I'm sure you have an illustrious career at whatever's coming, whether it's competing in the immediate future, or I know you've got, daughter and your training plan and CrossFit Reykjavik and everything. You've got so many irons on the fire. So I think I appreciate you taking the time out. I appreciate your consistent sharing of the good and the bad and everything in between. And I wish you luck with whatever it is happens for you from here on out.
oh, thank you. My pleasure. This is
Cool.
awesome.